Hi friends, welcome to QApedia, and this is our blog qapedia.com. Today the topic that we are going to cover is JavaScript tutorial, different ways of declaring or defining a function in JavaScript. The subtopics that we will cover today are 9 different ways of declaring or defining a function in JavaScript. First way is function declaration, function expression is the second. Third is arrow function. Fourth is function constructor. Fifth is IIFE, immediately invoked function expression, generator function. Seventh is anonymous function. Eighth is recursive function, and ninth is higher order function. And then at the end, summary of the session. So let's start. 9 different ways of declaring or defining a function in JavaScript. So in one of our previous session, we had seen what is a function, and in this session we are going to see how can we declare a function in different ways. So first thing is function declaration. So this is a type of function which we have already discussed in our previous session. Let's see the example and syntax for the same. So what is the syntax for that? First of all, we have to write a keyword called function. Then we have to write the name of the function. Then we have to write parenthesis, then curly braces, and curly braces close, and inside those curly braces we have to write the body of the function, the code of the function. So let's see this in our code. So let's write code for this in our replit. So first we'll write function keyword. Then we'll write function name, and then inside this we'll write the code of the function. So we'll write here console dot log print 2 plus 3. Right, this is how we write a function, a normal function. Now let's run it. So nothing is happening. So why nothing is happening? Because we will have to call this function also. How can we call it? We'll have to just copy this, and we'll copy and paste it here, and then we'll put a semicolon here, and then if we run, then you can see 2 plus 2 is 5. It is printing here. If we want, we can print here 3 plus 4, and if then we will run it, then it is going to print 7 here. Okay, so this is how our function, normal function declaration works. Now this type of function will have 4 types, which we already discussed in our previous session, but let's see it again. So function with no parameters and no return type, function with parameters and no return type, function with no parameters but with return type, and function with parameters and with return type. So this particular function which we have seen is this one, function with no parameters and no return type. So what are parameters? Parameters are something which we pass inside this parenthesis. And what is return type? When this function will return some value, then there will be some return type of the function, and we have to use return keyword for that. So let's see example for this last one, function with parameters and with return type. So function add, and here we will pass some parameters. So everything is same, and then here in place of 3 plus 4 we have to write here x plus y. So this is how our function will work, and in place of console.log we will simply write return. That's it. Okay, so now we have parameters also, and we have return type also. Now if suppose I want to call this particular function, then I will have to provide some value here. Okay, so x plus y is should have some value when we call it. So we'll provide here value 3, 4. Okay, some value we can provide, any value we want we can provide. So let's run it. So it is run, but nothing is happening. We are not seeing anything in console. So if we want to see something in console, we have to print this particular value. So we can write it something like this, because this is returning some value. So when we call this function, then we'll get some value, and we can store that particular value is in some variable. Okay, and let's say that variable is C. Then whatever is the result, we can print it. So we can print the value of C. So that's it. This is how we'll write it. And now if you see, we can see 7 is being printed. If you want, we can write here 4 comma 4 also, and then what will happen, 8 will be printed. So like this, our function with parameters and function with return type will work. And this was for function declaration. Now let's see function expression. So function expression is a kind of anonymous function. Okay, an anonymous function is a function which does not have any name. So here when we were writing a function, we were giving some name to our function. Okay, add or some other name we can give. But in case of function expression, we won't give this particular name. We'll directly write function. How will we know it is a function? Because we will use function keyword, and then we will use some those two parentheses. So this parenthesis means we are using function. So let's see how to write a function expression. So we'll just say function, and we'll just use parenthesis, and inside this we'll write console dot log, and we'll write here 2 plus 3, and yeah, that's it. This is how we'll write it. Now the problem here is that this function statement requires a function name. Now we did not give any name to it, right? So that's why we are facing that kind of error. So when there is no name for this function, then how can we call this type of function? So what we need to do, we have to write this function expression something like this. Okay, so this function will not have any name, but because we are assigning the values or this body of this function to some variable, so that variable will become the name of the function. Okay, so what will we do, we will write here const add is equals to this particular function. Now you see, we were getting some error earlier, now we are not getting any error, and if I will run it, then nothing is printing, but no error is coming. Now if I want to call this function, then I have a name, I can call this function also. Okay, so let's just call it, and yeah, it is printing 5. So this is how a function expression can be written. Then for in this case also, we can have these 4 types of parameters, no parameters, 4 types of function, no parameters, no return type, with parameters, no return type, and with parameters, with return type. So we will write that particular function with this type of function. So we will provide some parameters here, x comma y, and here we will write x, and here we'll write y, and then if you want to call it, we can call it something like this, 2 comma 3, and what will we do, we'll simply call it. So when we call, 5 will be printed. So this is a function with parameter, but there is no return type. So now what we'll do, we'll provide some return type here. So return x plus y. So this time it is returning some value. So when we will call this function, we have to store it in some variable. So we'll write here let c is equals to this, and then console.log c. set run. So yeah, now it is printing 5. So this is how our function expression will work. Now let's see arrow function. So arrow function is the most popular type of function. This function is somewhat like same like function expression, the function expression that we have studied just now. So arrow function is also same like that. So we don't need to write function keyword when we declare an arrow function. So in case of function expression, we were using function keyword, right? We don't need to use function keyword for arrow function. And in place of function keyword, we write arrow keys. We will use some arrow keys like this. Some arrow keys we will use in case of arrow function. Okay. So let's see how our arrow function works. So a normal function expression is something like this. We write function keyword. We don't give any name. Then we'll write parenthesis, and inside this parenthesis we'll write our code, our function body. So now if suppose we want to write arrow keyword, we don't want to write function expression, then we can remove this function keyword, and then here we can write arrow. We can use arrow, and that's it. Our arrow function is ready. Now if you want to call this function, you can simply copy this add and you can copy it. That's it. Run, and yeah, done. We are able to call this function. If you want, we can write here 3 comma 3 plus 3 also, and yeah, it is done. Like this our arrow function will be called. Now what we can do, if for this arrow function also we will have these 4 types of function with no parameters, no return type, parameters, no return type, and all this. Here we have function with parameters and with return type. This we will try for arrow keyword. So we'll provide some parameters x comma y, and we'll write here x plus y, and then we can call this add function, and we'll write here 2 comma 8 comma 7, and it is printing 15. Now if we want function with return type also, so we can write here return, and then whatever value we are passing here, then this arrow function will return some value. We can store that value somewhere here. Constant c is equals to, and then console.log c. So it is working like this. So this is how our arrow function will work. Then what is function constructor? So normally how do we create a constructor in other languages like Java and all? We will use a new keyword to create a constructor. Same way, if we have to create a function constructor, we will need to use a new keyword. So what are the rules for creating a function constructor? Write new keyword before function. Okay, like this. There will be arguments in the parenthesis, and the last argument will be the definition of the body, and then first argument or second argument will be the parameters that we need to use in the body. Okay, and all the arguments that we write, we should be writing it in single quotes, and it should be separated by comma. So this is the rule for a function constructor. Okay, so let's write it. We can write it something like this. Okay, so let's write new function, and the last argument is the definition or body. Okay, so what are we doing? We are doing sum. So what we'll do, we'll write here return x, or we will write here, yeah, return x plus y, and we will write it in single quotes, and this is our last parameter. So what will be the first parameter? First parameter would be x, and then second parameter would be y. So like this, what we'll do, we will like this we will write it, but we are seeing some error here. So why this error is coming? Yeah, sorry, here we have to write capital F. Yeah, and now if we want, we can run it. So let's run this, and we are seeing nothing is happening, because for this function also there is no name, right? And if we want to call this function, we need to give some name. So what we can do, we can write some name here. Const add is equals to new function, and it is returning sum of two functions. So we will, when we will call this function, let's call it add 5 comma 6. Then we have to it is returning some value, so we have to take the return type somewhere, take the return value somewhere. Let's c is equals to add 5 comma 6, and then again same thing, console dot log c, and let's run this now. Let's see what happens. Yeah, it is printing. So this is how we write our function with constructor. So this is how function with constructor will work. Okay, and this type of function is not used much, but we are just knowing it for knowledge purpose. Then we have a function called IIFE, immediately invoked function expression. So until now, whichever function we have seen, for each and every function we were writing definition, and then we were calling it somewhere, we were invoking it explicitly. But what if we have a function which we don't need to call, which we don't need to invoke, and it will be invoked automatically, immediately as soon as we write it, it will be invoked. Okay, and that kind of type of function is also called a self-invoking function. So a self-invoking function is called IIFE, immediately invoked function expression. This type of function is written and invoked immediately. As soon as we write it, we invoked it that time, we invoke it that time itself, and that's why it is called as self-invoking function. This type of function will be executed itself, we don't need to call it. Okay, so how do we write it? What are the rules for writing it? So write parenthesis. Okay, first of all we need to write parenthesis, and inside the parenthesis we have to write function keyword, and again we have to write, after function keyword we have to write a parenthesis. Okay, and then we have to write some body inside the curly braces, and when all this is complete, then we have to write a parenthesis and we have to use a semicolon. That's it, and then this function will be invoked immediately. Okay, so let's see this once. So what are the rules? The first rule is write a parenthesis. So we will write a parenthesis. Inside this parenthesis we will write function. We have written function, and function, with function we have to write parenthesis also. Then we'll write a body. Okay, what is this body? We'll write here console dot log. This is a self-invoking function. Or yeah, hello world, and so done. Now write parenthesis and write a semicolon. That's it. This is how a self-invoking function will be written, and run it, and you can see it is invoked. As soon as we return it, it is invoked. We don't need to call it explicitly. So this is how our IIFE or self-invoking function will be written and invoked. Then we have generator function. Okay, so what is the generator function? So it's a function that returns an iterator object for generating a sequence of value, and this type of function is called a generator function. What are the rules for declaring a generator function? We need to use function keyword, so we are using it, and this function keyword should be used with wildcard, so we are using a wildcard, and we have to use a keyword called yield, so we have to use a keyword called yield. And anyways, for any function we have to give some name, so this is the name of the function. Then how do we use it, how do we call it? So it's very simple. Yield is also a type of return type, so this function is returning something in the form of yield. So what will we do? We'll write we will call this function, and we will write here, we will store that value into this some constant. Okay, and after that we can use this particular constant for all the getting all the values of this particular function. So let's see that thing now. So the rules for creating a function is function, then star, then some name of the function. So we'll just copy that here. Generate sequence number, yield 1 2 3, it is coming here. Okay, that's how. Now if we want to call it, then const, and we'll write here generator is equals to generate sequence number. So that's it. Then we'll write console.log, and here we'll write generator dot next dot value. Okay, that's how we will write. Sorry, this one with the value. So that's how we will write. Let's run it and see what happens. So it is printing 1. How many values we have? We have 3 values, so we will just copy it and paste it. And it is printing like this, 1 2 3. Like this we can use a generator function. So this is also not much important, just for knowledge purpose we are seeing it. So now let's see anonymous function. Anonymous function is a type of function which has no name or no identifier. Callback functions and function expressions are the example of such function. We have seen function expression in this session only. The second function was function expression only, right? So function expression is an example of anonymous function. So function expression we have already seen, and what is callback function? We'll see it in our coming sessions when we will discuss about asynchronization in JavaScript. So for now, if you want to understand what is an anonymous function, then we can simply say that a function without any name is an anonymous function. Now, how can we run an anonymous function? Because it doesn't have any name, right? Then how can we run that run anonymous function? So what we can do, we can write this anonymous function inside a function. And how do we write an anonymous function inside a function? How do we do that? We'll see that thing. Okay, so let's say we have an array and we want to print each and every element of the array using anonymous function. Then how can we write it? Let's see that thing. So let's go to arraylet, and yeah, so this is our array, constant numbers 1 2 3 4 5, and we are printing this array here. Yeah, so this is the original array. Okay, now what do we want to do? We want to print each and every element of the array using anonymous function. So we had seen one example of for each function in our last session, And using for each function we can, in that for each function we had seen one example of anonymous function. Using that anonymous function we can print each and every element of the array. So let's see how do we do that. So this is our array. So numbers dot for each, and here we'll write one more function, and we will use that keyword function, and inside that we'll pass one element, and then like this we'll write function, and I'll write here console.log ele. Now let's write one more thing. Let's run it. So it is printing original array is this. It is printing like this. Then it is printing elements of the original array are, elements of the original array are, and then each and every element is getting printed here, 1 2 3 4 5. Now let's say we want to print the square of the each and every element. Then what can we do? Square of the elements of the original array are is like, we'll write like this, and let's run it. So original array is this. Square of the original element of the original array are 1, 1 ka square 1, 2 square is 4, 3 square is 9, 4 square is 16, and 5 square is 25. So like this, an anonymous function can be used in our JavaScript. Okay. Let's see recursive function now. So what is a recursive function? Recursive function is a type of function which calls itself. Okay. Now if you want to see the example of recursive function, then let's see it here, that we will write here function keyword, and then we'll give the name of the function, do something, and then we'll pass some parameter here, n. And then if suppose the value of n is equals to 0, then we'll print some value on this console.log task complete, and then return. What is the meaning of this return keyword? Come outside of this function. Okay, this function will come outside. Then but if suppose the value is not n equal to 0, then what will happen? We'll print something on console that I am doing something. Okay, and after that again call this function for n minus 1 time. Okay, so whatever is the value of n, it will be reduced by 1. So what will happen now? This function will call here, come here again, and then it will be repeated until this n is equals to 0. Okay, so let's write this particular function now. Let's go to Replit and write this particular recursive function. Yeah, that's it. And let's call this function now. So we have written our recursive function and then we are calling it. So it's printing doing task 5 times and then task completed. Now we know that what is a recursive function. Recursive function is a type of function which calls itself. So we have called this function only once, okay, but inside this function we have written here do something. So same function we are calling, inside the function itself we are calling. So this function is calling itself, and that is why it is called a recursive function. But we have put a condition that if suppose this n is equals to 0, then we have to come outside of this loop. So what value we have given? We have given 5. 5 is given here, and if 5 is equal to 0, no, so it won't go inside this if. It will print the value doing task and then do something n minus 1. So 5 minus 1 is 4. So now 4 will be passed here. Now 4 is equal to 0, no it's not, so it will come here, it will print doing task. Now 4 minus 1 3, so do something 3, so 3 will be passed here, and like this it will call. And because we are printing 5 here, so this will be printed 5 times, and at the end task completed will be printed. Like this our recursive function will work. Okay, now let's talk about higher order function. So what is a higher order function? So any function that takes one or more functions as an argument. So any function that takes functions as an argument, it is called a higher order function. So how do we understand what is higher order function? So let's take an example for that. So let's write a normal function first, and then we can write an higher order function, and then we can call that higher order function, and that way we can understand higher order function easily. Okay, so let's do that. So let's write one normal function for addition or add. Function add. Yeah, okay, no, right here console dot log a plus b. Then we'll write one higher order function, and we will write it like some operate, and we'll write here add comma a comma b, and yeah, so this is how, sorry, not add, I'll write here func name, and then func name a comma b. Like this we'll write a higher order function. Now let's call this higher order function, and how we call it: operate. In place of this function name or func name, we'll write here add, and then in place of this a comma b, we'll give some parameter like 5 comma 7, and that's it. And let's run it. So this is a use of higher order function. We can pass a parameter here, and then we can make use of this higher order function. Let's say we have one more function, and that function is for multiplication a comma b, and yeah, correct. So like this that function is. So we can do one thing, we can call that function again, operate add, and then we can call it for multiplication also. And then Let's run it. So 12 will be for addition and 35 is for multiplication. So we can write many functions here, and then we can just use one function to operate our other functions. So this way our higher order function will help us in calling all our normal functions. So this is the main use of higher order function. So these were the main functions in JavaScript that we should be knowing. So let's see the summary now for this session. So we have covered below topics in today's in this session: function declaration, function expression, arrow function, function constructor, IIFE, immediately invoked function expression, generator function, anonymous function, recursive function, and then higher order function. So that's it in this session. Thank you very much, guys.